Welcome to another gripping episode of Silent Crime Case, where we dive into the darkest corners of real-life murder mysteries. Today we find ourselves in Fort Collins, Colorado, a place known for its breathtaking views of the Rocky Mountains and tight-knit community. But in May of 2019, this peaceful town was rocked by a crime so shocking that it left everyone reeling. This is the tragic story of a beloved teacher's untimely death, driven by her husband's deadly obsession with jealousy and control. Dr. Vivian Severn was a 42-year-old English professor, celebrated by her students for her captivating teaching style and knowledge of British interwar literature. However, behind the charisma and academic prowess was a complex personal life, one that would eventually unravel and lead to her tragic murder. Fort Collins is often described as a picturesque town, where the pace of life is slow and family values are cherished. Nestled against the backdrop of the Rocky Mountains, it seems like the last place you'd expect to find yourself in the middle of a chilling murder investigation. But on the morning of May 15, 2019, that's exactly what happened. Dr. Vivian Severn was a beloved figure at her local college. A scholar with a sharp mind and a passion for teaching, she was admired by students and colleagues alike. But beneath this facade, there were secrets that would soon lead to a deadly confrontation. Her story is a chilling reminder that even the most seemingly perfect lives can be destroyed by jealousy, obsession, and lies. On that fateful morning, the quiet halls of the campus were shattered by the horrific discovery of Dr. Severn's lifeless body in her office. The news spread quickly, sending shockwaves throughout the tight-knit academic community. What could have driven someone to murder a well-respected professor? And what secrets did Vivian Severn's seemingly perfect life hold? Vivian had been married to Robert Severn for 15 years. Robert, a 45-year-old businessman, owned a successful chain of laundromats in town called Clean Spin. Though he was a respected figure in the community, he had always lived in the shadow of his wife's brilliance. Robert was a reserved man, often described as private and introverted, quite the opposite of Vivian's outgoing personality. While Vivian thrived in the public eye, Robert preferred to keep to himself. The marriage, once filled with love and shared dreams, had become strained in recent years. Vivian had developed close relationships with many of her students. Her engaging teaching style and willingness to help students outside of class made her a favorite among them. She was always willing to invite students to her office for extra tutoring, and sometimes, even to her home. Vivian's life was filled with intellectual pursuits. She was writing a 700-page book on the role of interwar literature in historical erotic fiction, a project that consumed much of her time and energy. Vivian's reputation on campus was stellar, but her personal life told a different story. Friends and family had begun to notice a change in her over the past few months. The once vibrant and energetic professor seemed distant, almost as though she were carrying a burden too heavy to share. Robert, her husband, had also grown increasingly paranoid. Whispers of infidelity between Vivian and her students had reached his ears, fueling his jealousy and suspicions. Outside of her professional life, Vivian was an active member of the Fort Collins community. She led a local book club, often organizing group hikes in the nearby Rocky Mountains. Her friends and colleagues described her as a woman with an infectious laugh and boundless energy. She seemed to have it all: a successful career, a loving husband, and a wide circle of friends. But beneath the surface, cracks were starting to appear. Robert's jealousy had begun to fester. Rumors about Vivian's close relationships with some of her male students had reached him, and his once mild-mannered demeanor became increasingly paranoid and obsessive. While Robert never openly confronted Vivian about the rumors, the tension in their marriage was palpable. Friends and family noticed that Robert had grown distant, while Vivian continued to live her life as though everything was fine. It was a typical spring morning in Fort Collins when Hank Murphy, a longtime janitor at the local college, began his routine rounds. The sun had just risen, casting a warm glow over the campus. As Hank approached Dr. Vivian Severn's office, he noticed something unusual. Her office door was slightly open. Vivian was meticulous about locking her door, so Hank found this strange. He knocked softly, but there was no response. Concerned, Hank pushed the door open and stepped inside. What he saw would haunt him for the rest of his life. Vivian was slumped over her desk, her lifeless body riddled with 2 gunshot wounds. Blood had pooled around her, soaking the papers and books scattered across her desk. The room, once vibrant and full of energy, was eerily silent. Hank stumbled back in shock, his mind racing to process the horrific scene. After a moment of frozen disbelief, He rushed to the nearest phone and called campus security. Within minutes, the police arrived, and the once quiet college campus was transformed into a bustling crime scene. The discovery of Dr. Severn's body sent shockwaves through the academic community. Students and faculty alike were left in disbelief as they grappled with the horrifying reality that one of their own had been murdered. Investigators were called to the scene, and the investigation began with a thorough examination of the office. Detectives noted that there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Vivian had known her assailant. This immediately led them to focus on the people closest to her family, friends, and students. Forensic teams collected evidence from the scene, including bullet casings, blood samples, and fingerprints. The stage was set for an investigation that would reveal dark secrets and hidden motives. Detective Sarah Lane Bryant, known for her sharp instincts and methodical approach, was called in to lead the investigation. Bryant had seen her fair share of tough cases, but the murder of a beloved professor in a small, quiet town like Fort Collins was a rare and disturbing event. The first step in the investigation was to secure the crime scene. Forensic experts meticulously photographed every inch of Vivian's office, paying close attention to the bullet casings found near her desk. The position of the wounds and the angle of the bullet suggested that the killer had been standing close to Vivian when the shots were fired. As the investigation unfolded, the police began to piece together the final days of Vivian's life. Her colleagues reported that she had been in high spirits, looking forward to an upcoming hiking trip with friends. There were no immediate signs that anything was amiss, but as detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a web of rumors about Vivian's personal life, rumors that pointed to trouble in her marriage. The police questioned Robert Severn early on. His alibi that he had been at home the night of the murder was shaky at best. He claimed to have been working on financial reports for Clean Spin, but when asked if anyone could verify his whereabouts, Robert faltered. As the questioning continued, Robert became increasingly defensive, especially when asked about his wife's alleged affairs. Forensic analysis of the crime scene yielded few immediate clues, but it was clear that the killer had a close connection to Vivian. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Vivian may have known her assailant. Her phone and laptop were seized, and detectives began combing through her communications in search of clues. Meanwhile, Detective Bryant also began interviewing Vivian's colleagues and students. Although they described her as dedicated and professional, some hinted at the possibility of inappropriate relationships with students. These rumors pointed to potential motives that detectives needed to explore further. The investigation soon turned its focus to Robert Severn. Though Robert initially cooperated with the police, his behavior during subsequent interrogations raised suspicions. Friends and family members described Robert as an intensely private person, but in recent months, he had become consumed by jealousy. The rumors of Vivian's infidelity gnawed at him, driving him to the brink of obsession. During one particularly tense interrogation, Robert's calm facade began to crack. When Detective Bryant pressed him about his feelings regarding Vivian's relationships with her students, Robert became visibly agitated. His answers became evasive, and his once composed demeanor gave way to anger. Investigators took a closer look at some of Vivian's students, particularly those with whom she had close and complicated relationships. A student named Jason Maddox, for instance, had been seen spending an unusual amount of time in her office. Known for his quiet demeanor and outstanding academic performance, Jason had always been a teacher's pet, but some whispered that his relationship with Vivian went beyond academics. When Jason was brought in for questioning, he appeared nervous. He denied any inappropriate involvement with Vivian, claiming that their relationship was strictly professional. But detectives couldn't ignore his jittery responses or the fact that he had been seen near Vivian's office the night before the murder. As the investigation progressed, the forensic team made a breakthrough that would significantly impact the case. A flash drive was discovered near the crime scene, and its contents revealed disturbing new information. On the flash drive were multiple videos showing Vivian engaging in sexual activities with several of her students. These videos confirmed the rumors of her infidelities, but also introduced a new layer of complexity to the investigation. The most recent video, recorded just hours before Vivian's murder, featured her with two students, Tanner and Lainey Taylor, 19-year-old twins. Their involvement in the video raised immediate suspicions, as they had been seen frequenting Vivian's office in the days leading up to the murder. Detective Bryant and her team now had a clearer picture of the potential motives behind the murder. The affair with the twins, the strained marriage with Robert, and the pressure of maintaining a professional facade had all contributed to a volatile situation. The detectives realized that they were dealing with a tangled web of secrets, betrayal, and manipulation, where any of the people involved could have been driven to commit murder. The forensic analysis of the videos and digital evidence also revealed another critical detail. Robert had accessed the flash drive just hours before Vivian's death. This discovery further implicated him, as it suggested that he had knowledge of Vivian's secret life, which could have pushed him over the edge. The revelation of this video evidence opened up new leads, and the detectives began focusing on not only Robert, but also the Taylor twins, as their involvement with Vivian suggested they might have had a role in her murder. Detectives obtained a search warrant for their dorm room, where they found additional items belonging to Vivian, including a notebook and a scarf. This, however, was still not enough to tie them directly to the crime. Meanwhile, the forensic analysis also revealed a stunning piece of evidence. A latent fingerprint on the flash drive matched Jason Maddox, the student who had been questioned earlier. Investigators now had another key suspect, and the tangled web of Vivian's relationships grew even more complicated. Could Jason have been driven to murder by jealousy, or was he being blackmailed by someone else involved in Vivian's secret life? The evidence against Jason began to pile up. When detectives seized his computer, they discovered emails between him and Vivian that hinted at a relationship beyond academics. The emails were emotional and hinted at possible threats from Jason if Vivian ended the relationship. Jason was brought back in for questioning, and this time his nervous demeanor was even more pronounced. Under the pressure of interrogation, Jason admitted to having a relationship with Vivian but denied any involvement in her death. The video footage added a significant layer of complexity to the case, revealing that Vivian's relationship with her students had crossed numerous professional boundaries. Tanner and Lainey Taylor were particularly implicated. These twins, who had been seen as model students by many, now found themselves under intense scrutiny. When detectives brought the twins in for questioning, both Tanner and Lainey initially maintained their innocence, denying any involvement in the murder. However, as the interrogations continued, cracks began to show in their stories. Both admitted to having a sexual relationship with Vivian, but insisted it had nothing to do with her death. Their alibis for the night of the murder were weak. Tanner claimed he was at the library while Lainey said she was with friends. Neither of these alibis could be corroborated. The investigation also revealed that Tanner and Lainey had become increasingly dependent on Vivian, both emotionally and academically. Some classmates had even suggested that the twins were using their relationship with Vivian to secure better grades. As detectives dug deeper, they began to wonder whether the twins' involvement in Vivian's life had taken a darker turn. Had the relationship become too intense? Had one or both of them become jealous of Vivian's other affairs? Further complicating matters, it became clear that Robert was aware of the relationship between Vivian and the twins. Robert's obsessive nature meant that he had likely known about his wife's affairs for some time, fueling his growing anger and resentment. Detectives now had to consider whether Robert, in a fit of jealous rage, had killed Vivian after learning of her latest affair, or whether the twins themselves had been involved in the crime. At the same time, Jason Maddox remained a person of interest. His volatile emotional state and his increasingly erratic behavior during the investigation suggested that he might have been capable of violence. But without direct evidence tying him to the murder, detectives were forced to continue exploring other avenues. As the investigation intensified, the police found themselves closing in on their prime suspect, Robert Severn. The combination of digital evidence, Robert's shaky alibi, and his deteriorating mental state painted a damning picture. Detectives knew that they were on the verge of a breakthrough. On May 23, 2019, Robert was officially arrested for the murder of his wife. The arrest was met with mixed emotions within the community. Some believed Robert had always been the likely culprit, while others were shocked that a seemingly mild-mannered man could commit such a heinous crime. During his interrogation, Robert initially maintained his innocence, but the weight of the evidence against him was overwhelming. For hours, detectives pressed him on his whereabouts, his knowledge of Vivian's affairs, and his mental state leading up to the murder. Finally, under the immense pressure, Robert broke down and confessed. In a tearful and emotional confession, Robert revealed that he had discovered the videos on the flash drive just hours before Vivian's death. The realization that his wife had been unfaithful yet again, this time with two of her students, had driven him into a blind rage. Unable to control his emotions, Robert confronted Vivian in her office, where the argument escalated into violence. In a fit of jealousy and anger, Robert retrieved a handgun and shot Vivian twice. The trial of Robert Severn began in January 2022, delayed by the COVID-19 pandemic. The courtroom was packed with media, family members, and curious locals, all eager to see how the case would unfold. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Tabitha Quasimodo, presented a strong case against Robert. They detailed his motive, opportunity, and the digital evidence that linked him to Vivian's murder. Quasimodo argued that Robert's jealousy and obsession with Vivian's infidelities drove him to commit the crime. She called several witnesses to the stand, including detectives who worked on the case and experts who explained the metadata from the flash drive. The prosecution painted a clear picture of a man pushed to his breaking point by his wife's actions. The defense, handled by Robert's attorney Lisa Martin, argued that Robert had been under immense emotional stress and had not acted with premeditation. She tried to cast doubt on the reliability of the digital evidence and suggested that someone else could have planted it to frame Robert. Throughout the trial, Vivian's family watched with heavy hearts. They were torn between their love for Robert and their need for justice for Vivian. The emotional toll was evident as they listened to the graphic details of the case and the arguments from both sides. The trial lasted for 3 weeks with intense media coverage and daily updates in local newspapers and on news channels like NBC and CNN. On February 4, 2022, the jury reached a verdict. The courtroom was silent as the foreperson announced that Robert Severn was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The community of Fort Collins was left reeling from the revelations of the case. Dr. Vivian Severn, who had once been seen as a respected professor and community leader, had been living a secret life that shocked everyone who knew her. The trial had exposed the dark underbelly of her relationships, leaving her legacy tarnished. But while some chose to focus on the scandal, others remembered Vivian for her contributions to academia and the positive impact she had on her students. In her memory, a scholarship fund was established for literature students at the college. It was a way to honor her passion for teaching and ensure that her academic legacy lived on. Despite the tragic circumstances of her death, Vivian's intellectual contributions would continue to benefit future generations of students. Robert Severn began serving his life sentence in the Colorado State Penitentiary. His once promising future had been destroyed by jealousy, obsession, and rage. His family, devastated by the outcome, struggled to come to terms with the fact that Robert had murdered his wife in cold blood. Over time, visits from friends and family became less frequent, as Robert was left to grapple with his guilt and the reality of his actions. Tanner and Lainey Taylor, the students at the center of the scandal, faced a difficult road ahead. Although they were never charged in connection with the murder, their involvement in the case had a profound impact on their lives. The intense media scrutiny and public backlash forced both siblings to withdraw from school and retreat from public life. Over time, they attempted to rebuild their lives, but the shadow of the case would forever hang over them. Detective Sarah Lane Bryant and her team were praised for their meticulous work in solving the case. The investigation had been complex, filled with twists and turns, but in the end, justice had been served. The department implemented new training programs to help handle sensitive cases involving personal relationships and digital evidence, ensuring that their officers were better prepared for future challenges. The case of Dr. Vivian Severn's murder left an indelible mark on the Fort Collins community. Local organizations and schools started offering more mental health support services, particularly for students and teachers. There was a growing recognition that even those who seemed to be leading perfect lives could be silently battling their own demons. In the months following the trial, discussions about professional ethics and boundaries in academic settings gained more attention. Although Vivian's life was shrouded in scandal by the end, her friends and colleagues chose to remember her as the dedicated educator she once was. They organized a memorial service, focusing on the positive impact she had made on her students and the local community. The service, filled with literature readings and fond recollections, was a stark contrast to the dark cloud that had hung over the last few months. Robert Severn remained behind bars, serving his life sentence in relative isolation. Media coverage of the trial gradually died down, and the public moved on to other stories. For the Severn family, however, the pain remained. They struggled to come to terms with the tragedy that had unfolded within their family, the loss of both Vivian and Robert in different ways. Tanner and Lainey Taylor, the twins caught up in the scandal, eventually relocated out of state, hoping to rebuild their lives away from the public eye. Their involvement in the case, though not criminal, had left a permanent stain on their reputations. Both received therapy to deal with the emotional toll of the ordeal, and over time, found new paths in their lives. As Fort Collins slowly healed, the lessons learned from the case of Dr. Vivian Severn lingered. It served as a grim reminder that jealousy, obsession, and unchecked emotions could destroy even the most respected lives. Though the town returned to its quiet, peaceful state, the scars left by the tragic events remained beneath the surface. Thank you for joining us on this intense episode of Silent Crime Case. The tragic story of Dr. Vivian Severn's murder reminds us of the devastating consequences of jealousy and betrayal. What do you think about this case? Was justice truly served in the end, or do you think there were still unanswered questions? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life murder mysteries. Stay safe, true crime case solvers, and we'll see you next time with another shocking tale from the world of crime.